Welcome to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vinosky. Industry has a million cool stories, and Jim talks to the movers and shakers who are making them happen. Let's dive in.
Welcome back to Manufacturing Talks. I'm Jim Vinosky, your host. We're sponsored by Cosgrove Content, your wordsmiths for industry. So we write for industrial customers who might have trouble finding people who can write about what they do effectively. If you are in that boat, give us a holler. Find us at cosgrovecontent.com. And I'm pleased today to be joined by Melissa Martin. She's the Director of Marketing at Lab Midwest and the producer of the TechEd podcast. Welcome, Melissa.
Thanks, Jim. Glad to be here.
Glad you're here. Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year.
It's still January, so we're still saying that. So it's really especially good to have you on because you come with knowledge about a topic that is huge for all of us in the manufacturing world, and that is obviously technical education. So we'll be diving into that for sure. I want to hear all your perspectives on what's going on out there and what folks ought to be doing. But first, tell us about yourself. Tell us, where you come from and how you got into what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to. And it's funny because I was thinking about this very thing. And there's a phrase I hear people say all the time where they find their way into manufacturing, which is kind of what I did. And so my background is in marketing. I actually have an English degree, but I've always been really excited about reaching students. So no matter what I wanted to do, I wanted to work with students in some capacity. And so I had for a long time thought I was going to be a teacher and started going down that path and realized I wasn't cut out for it. It's really, really hard to be a teacher. And we'll probably end up talking about some of that. But I mean, they're heroes, that's for sure. But I wanted to be part of something impactful. And I also love stories. And so, having an English degree, I love reading, I love books and stories, and marketing just was a perfect fit for that. And I found my way to Lab Midwest, and we'll talk a little bit more about what we do here, but it's this perfect convergence of being able to tell the stories of things that are happening in the world of technical education and STEM and in the workforce that I don't think get to be shared often enough or don't get enough visibility. And so I feel like it's, achieving my personal mission, which is to inspire and motivate students on their future pathways. And we're doing some really, really cool stuff, but also providing visibility into this whole world that not enough people know about, and just making light of all the incredible things happening in tech ed and in manufacturing.
Yeah, that's excellent stuff. I've talked quite a bit about our need in manufacturing to be better marketers of what we do and how cool it is. So let's definitely talk more about that. But so jumping in with what it is you do, and you wear a couple of hats here. So Lab Midwest, you mentioned, tell us more about what's going on there.
Yeah, at Lab Midwest, our mission is to secure the American dream for the next generation of STEM and workforce talent. And so we do that by working directly with schools from K-12 to technical and community colleges and universities on building out just really incredible, advanced, cutting-edge programs all around STEM and technical education, advanced manufacturing, and basically any kind of industrial technology. So working with them on really relevant curriculum, on building out their labs with cutting-edge technology systems, learning equipments, tying those back to industry-recognized certifications. And we do a lot on the consulting side, helping them to build relationships with their local industry and creating those partnerships. We do a lot on the advocacy side for creating dual credit pathways between high schools and colleges, which is really, really important. And on the same side, doing the same thing with 2-year colleges, articulating into 4-year programs. And then in addition to what we do on the education side, a big and emerging part of our business is on the industrial workforce training side. Because, the skills gap has been an issue for a long time. And, regardless of all the efforts that we've made on the education side of things, it's just not enough, and it will never be enough. The math will never work out. And it's going to take a lot from the employers themselves to reskill and upskill their own workforce, especially as we're in this era of Industry 4.0. So that's another part of what we do is working with those employers on helping them upskill and reskill their own employee base. So that's what I do at Lab Midwest.
Excellent. And we will dive into those points a little more. But before we do that, tell us about your podcast, TechEd Podcast.
Yeah. So I got hired here at Lab Midwest. I've been here for about 4.5 years. And so the world of manufacturing wasn't new to me. My dad, he's the proverbial story of somebody who started going to college. College wasn't for him. He spent time in the military during Vietnam era. He went into manufacturing and just worked his way up to the point where he was running the company. And he's just that proverbial success story, right? Of just how that can happen in manufacturing. My little brother followed in his footsteps, did the same thing. He started working there when he was in high school, just sweeping the floor. And during his college years, he kind of shadowed, and now he's in his mid-20s and just running that place. It's an incredible thing. My husband is a CNC machinist doing work on Swiss machines in the aerospace and defense industries, just the incredible projects that he gets to work on. So I've been exposed to manufacturing for a really long time, and being a lifelong Wisconsinite, it's like you're ingrained in it. It's everywhere. We're such, the Midwest in general, Wisconsin especially, it's such a manufacturing heavy state. But I'll admit, I was still that person where my only educational exposure to it was the Industrial Revolution in my history textbook. And my school didn't have a technical education program. So I knew what a manufacturing facility looked like. I'd been to my dad's many times. I worked there over the summers, but they weren't necessarily the most advanced facility in the world. And so I really had no idea what true advanced manufacturing looks like, and Industry 4.0. And when I started here at Lab Midwest, I was like, oh my, this is incredible. Like, this is so cool. And like the technology that people get to work with, and the things that they're building, and the way they're building them, and the data analysis and the AI. And it's just like, it's incredible. And you think about all of those students who hate school, frankly, and they feel for like failures because they're not good at traditional school. But then they find their way into technical education, and they light up, and they're just like, wow, this is my path. This is what I meant for. And so we started telling the stories of these technical education programs and really diving into not just like, hey, there's this school and here's what they're doing, but like interviewing the students and talking to them about what it means for them and what their future looks like, and just hearing how much these programs impacted the students. I sat there and I was saying, we're sharing these in article forms and, webinars, but I'm a big podcast listener, and that's how I consume information. And I was like, there isn't a podcast out there that talks specifically about technical education. And there's a lot out there that talk about education and maybe education technology. There's a lot of podcasts out there that are about manufacturing, but I was like, we need to tie these two together and share these stories. And because you have these educators on one part of the country or world who are trying to figure something out, and somebody else has already solved that problem, and they can just hear that story and see, okay, someone else has done it. Here's the roadmap, and here's what we're doing. And so we started the TechEd podcast in 2021 to basically bridge the gap between education and the workforce on the technical education side of things. It's been a lot of fun. It's been a crazy ride, but we're growing every day, and I think we're sharing a really important message. Yeah, well, and it's obviously such a great fit with what you're doing day to day. Yeah, so exactly. Finding all the people very easily that you need to talk to and tie together. Right. Excellent. And how frequently does that come out? Where do people find it? Yeah, it's every Tuesday we release a new episode, and it's wherever you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, Google. We're also doing YouTube shorts, so our traditional podcasts aren't on video format. So for our long form episodes on Tuesdays, you got to go to your favorite podcast platform or to our website, which is techedpodcast.com. And then you can also catch some of our live episodes and shorts on YouTube. Yep, perfect. And so you're covering exactly what we're going to talk about, obviously. And a couple points I wanted to hit.
for sure are the things that companies ought to be doing and the things that students ought to be doing, and you're right in the middle of that. But before we dive into that, you were talking about schools. Your school didn't have tech ed, and I think we're starting to see that bounce back, but I still hear where a lot of schools are behind on that. So if you look at the schools at the various levels, and you're covering basically K to 12, right? What should schools be doing differently today to better meet the needs of what's out there in industry?
Yeah, for sure. And I'll say we're seeing it being ingrained in every day. We're seeing really, really good progress. STEM wasn't a term that we even used when I was in school.
Right.
And now there's in elementary schools, they have STEM specific classes. So it's really, really, we're doing a really good job. I think what happened was, when I was in school, everyone was pushing students towards that university 4-year pathway. And so the tech ed programs died out. They're coming back because people are realizing that you don't need a 4-year degree to do a lot of the jobs out there. And employers are starting to release that barrier on their applications, and they're looking for specific skills, specific certifications, technical diplomas, what have you. And you got a whole generation of people burned by student debt from universities. So people are looking for any other path that can avoid that. But I would say,
jump in real quick. It's very interesting you say that, because I have a son graduating this year, and when we first started talking about what was next, before we talked about any school, any program, he said, the main thing I want to focus on is not getting into debt. So people are figuring that out.
Good. That's one of the other things too, and we can talk about that. It's a whole nother topic, but informing parents, I think, is a huge issue. Very
good point. Absolutely.
Yeah. But back to your point about schools, I would say at the middle school, we're doing a really good job, I think, incorporating more, if you think like STEM focused learning, critical thinking, problem solving. A lot of schools have coding and robotics in more age appropriate forms in the elementary and middle school. I think we need to not underestimate students' ability to pick up authentic industrial technology. We have schools who have FANUC industrial robots in the middle school. I mean, and these are the exact same models that they're using in the workforce, and these students aren't afraid of anything. They will. I heard something once, and it was like there's a generation that says, "I wonder what will happen if I push that button." There's another generation that says, well, let me look up what's going to happen if I push the button. And then there's a generation, let's push the button, see what happens. And I think that's the generation we're looking at right now. Is they're gonna push the button, and that's awesome. It's awesome. They grew up with technology, so they're not afraid of it. And we've got a middle school who is programming those FANUC robots in 8th grade. The reason I think that's so important is that exposure piece. We didn't. The Manufacturing Institute and Skills USA did a study of 23,000 students after they had graduated high school and chose their post-secondary pathways. And they said, what was the number one factor that influenced what you wanted to do with your life? And you saw all the typical responses. What my parents said I should do, or what my parents did, what my school counselor suggested, what my friends did, what social media said, all those answers. But the number one response, and it was like 2/3 of the responses, was their interests and experiences in middle and high school. And that middle school component is so much more critical, because that's when they start turning off to certain career pathways. Not that they've already decided what they're going to do, but they're deciding, I'm not going to do this. Especially girls. One of the instructors at Hennepin Tech, which is a college up in Minnesota, did his master's thesis on a study of middle school girls and found that they are the most, they're the biggest subset of our demographic of students that are going to turn off to especially industrial careers at that age. And so if we're not putting that technology in front of them, they don't even know it's an option for them once they get to high school and everything becomes an elective. So they're not going to choose those things. So I think the exposure to authentic industrial equipment earlier on is really, really important. And so we need to do that at the middle school level. At the high school level, where we have tech ed programs that already exist, we need to get beyond woods and metals. Because I don't know of a whole bunch of careers that are available in making birdhouses. But I mean, I'm talking like get industrial robots, industrial controls, mechatronic systems. We need to get these students on the same technology they're going to see in the workforce again, so that they know that that's something that they can pursue and it can fire them up, and create those relevant career pathways and connections for them. And we're seeing it more. Oddly enough, we're seeing it a lot more in the rural districts than anything else, because you see a lot of those students tend to go directly to the workforce in their local area, don't necessarily leave as often as some of the other populations of students. But we need to see that happen more across the board. And that's I think what's important for K-12 education today.
You touched on a couple of these things, but talk a little bit more about what companies' needs are that schools should be aware of. What are the kind of modern technology things that we might be missing on that they should be considering as they put those classes together? Yeah.
And that's a really interesting question, because I think if you ask an employer, what do you need out of students graduating? You know what they're going to say? We need somebody who can show up to work on time every day and stay off of illegal substances, you know, but they're underestimating. They're not, they should be asking for more. So I think, obviously building those soft skills into our students should be part of every K-12 program, no matter what, if they're in a tech ed program or not. We should be teaching soft skills in the home and in school. But I think they're looking for, first of all, a basic awareness of what advanced manufacturing is. Like what machining is versus what metal fabrication is versus what welding is. I was working with a group of students who were in high school and they didn't know what welding was. And so just basic fundamental understanding of what advanced manufacturing is, and then basic print reading, blueprint reading, measurements, basic electrical, understanding how to wire an AC/DC circuit, basic mechanical knowledge, basic motor knowledge. I mean, these are really basic fundamental things that can easily be taught in a technical education program. And I think employers would love if a student came out of high school and wanted to go to workforce with just those basic things. They would be set up really, really well for success. Then add in a couple of the other layers where if they have a foundational understanding of lean theory, if they understand how to troubleshoot something, that's a bonus. And then I think we have seen schools go far, far beyond that in a really basic way, teaching industrial controls, basic ladder logic, PLC programming, basic industrial robot operations and programming on authentic industrial robots, not necessarily on the more tinker toy type stuff you see in schools too many times. And, you know, basic understanding of like mechatronic systems, electromechanical systems. Those students are worth their weight in gold, even if they don't have any post-secondary degree.
It's interesting too. I mean, you know, over half of what you mentioned there, any school can do regardless what their
it doesn't take much
machinery and equipment is. Great. So let's swing over to the companies. Obviously they're looking for more and more today, and you mentioned it early on. You know, if they're looking for someone else to solve their problems, they're going to be looking for a long time. So what should companies be thinking about as far as how they need to engage and what they need to provide to better prepare students for coming into the workforce?
Yeah, I think that they need to get involved early and often. And you got a lot of employers who want to, they're just not sure how. So, I mean, basic level job shadowing, going into classrooms and talking about their company. I mean, those are really basic things that a lot of companies are already doing. But hiring summer interns, writing letters of support and being part of grant funding opportunities when a lab is looking to expand, sitting on schools' advisory boards and actually talking about their workforce problems and helping develop and map out the future of the program. They have that ability to do that on these advisory boards. So, I mean, every employer, they should know the names of the principals and the superintendents in their district. They should know the names of the deans of the manufacturing programs at their local college and the instructors. by name. Like they should be meeting with these people and know them. And then they should be getting their foot in the door as early as possible and as often as possible.
Mhm.
And that's just, on the education side. And like I said, there's never going to be enough students to fill all of the job needs that we have in the labor force. So there's this whole other world of workforce development that has to happen that the employers have to step up and take advantage of.
Yeah, absolutely. I gave a speech not too long ago, and one point I made was just manufacturing opening their doors to students.
Yeah.
And so often we think we have these trade secrets and you have to keep everyone out of your building.
Yeah.
Most of us don't have that many trade secrets, as much as we'd like to think we do. But second of all, middle school and high school students aren't in there stealing your trade secrets.
No. They're not spies. Yeah.
But yeah, just like you were talking about, you had the opportunity to go into a plant when you were young, and most students aren't going to get that if they don't have that direct tie you did. So just getting students the opportunity to get into different operations and see what manufacturing is about.
And give them an opportunity to do something more than sweep the floor. If you're hiring a high school student, as much as they're legally allowed to do certain work at certain ages, let them, because I think these employers will be blown away by what these students are able to do, especially if you find a student who's already in a tech ed program or is mechanically inclined or loves working with their hands. They will appreciate that because they'll love going to their summer job. And then guess what? They're going to come back next year and the next year, and they're going to tell their friends about it. So
definitely. Yeah. Good. Well, so as you look at the broad landscape, then what are the 2 or 3 things that get you most fired up about what's going on right now?
I think the first one is just the growth of these programs and how it's just exploding all over the place. We get to see it by talking to these educators and employers every week on the podcast and by going across the country and seeing what's going on. But when we get one educator in the door, or we pull in a group of educators from different states to come and tour a different facility and the conversations they have going on. Oh, and then we pull in employers too, to be part of that discussion and how productive those discussions are. I think there's a lot more awareness and open conversation going on about technical education and, support for it. Look at all the funding that's coming from the federal government to support CTE these last few years. And I think this is like the golden age of technical education right now. We need to take advantage of this and grow it and advocate for it and make sure that this is not just a one-time thing, but this stays, because manufacturing is here to stay. Manufacturing is growing in the United States, and we need to make sure that we keep our technical educations funded and strong and growing. So I'm really excited to see all of that happening. I think another thing is I'm really excited by the amount of employers that are stepping up and owning employee reskilling and upskilling. You have, for a long time, they either relied on people to have those skills coming in, or, they would rely on their local technical college to do the work, whether it was sending their employees to the college, paying for their tuition, which is an awesome thing that employers do, or pulling in someone from the business and industry side of the technical college and, having them facilitate some learning for their employees. It's getting a lot harder to do that with the constraints of, everyone's got to get product out the door, supply chain issues, labor shortages. In the past couple of years, people just haven't had time to provide that skills-based training at work. One of the statistics that we share a lot is that in the 1970s, the average manufacturing employee got 100 hours of skills-based learning provided by their employer at work. And today it's 5. And it's all the things that OSHA says that we have to train for. Back in the 70s, a lot of that was facilitated and necessitated through the unions. But it was necessitated also by Industry 3.0. And you had all of these, this computerization of manufacturing, all this robotics and automation coming in. And it was adapt or die. I mean, you had to retrain your people because they had never seen this kind of technology. Well, now you have Industry 4.0. And as manufacturers realize that they need to get on the Industry 4.0 wave, and they're investing in more automation and smart technology, digitizing their processes, their employees are going to be around for a while, and they're going to need consistent upskilling and reskilling. And the employers are realizing they need to provide that themselves. And they're taking ownership, and they're finding ways to do that in-house for their employees, which is really exciting, because then you got employee retention, you got people who are happy, you've created a culture of lifelong learning, and everybody benefits. It's awesome.
Yeah. There are a lot of people talking about, because of the supply chain challenges you mentioned, how that very transactional mode we went into for better part of a generation, where the accountants were looking at every cost and thinking you just had to chop, chop, chop. And to your point about training, that was one of the places that was chopped. And just like having far-flung suppliers who are a great answer when everything goes well, it's not such a great answer when things don't go well. Similarly, chopping those training dollars and having your employees not educated on what they need to do when things get crazy and they need to do more, or they need to do things differently, then you're in a bind. So I agree with you there. I think we need to be refunding training. I was going to mention, you're kind of bookended there in Wisconsin by a couple of people that I cheer quite a bit. On the east side, you've got Aaron's. Are you familiar with Aaron's?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we had Dan Aaron's on our podcast.
Did you? Oh, what a great guy.
He was one of our first guests. He was probably like fourth or fifth guest. Yeah.
Salt of the earth, that guy.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Just an incredible family story, family history of manufacturing. Yeah.
I wrote about him for Forbes, and I got time set up with Dan. And when we talked, he said, I apologize if there's some noise or we lose connection. I'm actually on the way up to our cabin up north. Okay, so this is just a regular guy. The stuff they've done with local education is just outstanding. Basically helped establish the Brilliant school system to have STEM education.
Oh yeah, what they've done in Brilliant is unbelievable.
Yeah. But I visited there. And I was there this summer and touring and looking at their new robotic welding cells and the new automation they've put in. And Nick, Aaron's Dan's son, was giving me the tour. And I said, so Nick, do you have workers who, as you put in this automation, can train up and be the technicians that run this? He's like, absolutely. He's like, we were hoping that would be the case as we looked at this up front, but people are knocking down the doors to get these jobs, and they'll bend over backwards to go to the classes and learn what they need to learn. And so, do not sell people short, because they will demonstrate that they're fully capable of taking on these higher level jobs that are being created by all this technology. The other one is on the other side of the state. Is do you know Craig Sigelski?
Oh yeah.
I figured you would.
A really cool program too.
Absolutely, the creating a small business from your TechEd and right there in your high school. That's just phenomenal.
I don't know if he was the first to do it, but he's been doing it for so long, and everybody else is modeling after Cardinal. What they're doing.
I'm sure he wasn't the first, but I think they've just done such a phenomenal job, not just having the business, but then, he made a point when he was on the show here a few months ago about how they don't just train on the technical side, they train people skills. They train people to shake hands properly, to dress properly, to, address adults in a manner that adults ought to be addressed in. It's just, I just can't imagine those students coming out of that program having any trouble getting jobs.
No, none. And you think about, your traditional tech ed program being like, okay, you're thinking about your hands-on technical industrial skills, but he's got students who are running the accounting and students who are running the sales operations and all of it, the marketing, and it truly is a business.
Yeah, it's amazing stuff. So you're in a good spot there in Wisconsin. Lots of very cool stuff going on. So you talked about what's going on now. As you look to the future, what do you think's coming down the road that people ought to be aware of and be preparing for?
I think we're going to see, it's not new. It's been around for forever, but just automation is just going to grow far more rapidly. And it's going to find its way, bleed down into education. It already has. FANUC has their certified education robotics program that's been around for 10 or 15 years already that they've had like a structured program for robotics, because they saw this a long time ago. All of their customers were purchasing robots, and then they realized, well, we don't have anybody to run these things. To your point about errands, it's like, this is really cool, but what happens when anything happens or we want to change the system? Right. So, they were forethinking, and hey, let's get this into the schools. And we've got, I think, probably between 50 and 60 high schools in Wisconsin that are doing the FANUC CERT program. So all hundreds and thousands of students a year are getting trained on these industrial robots in high school, and they can go out making $60,000 a year right out of high school, just in a one semester course. Wow. So I think automation, we're going to see a lot more of that. And so you're thinking like maybe in the high school level, we're doing basic industrial robots. And then I foresee that being more on the technical community college side of things, more integration and more like full systems integration of not just robots, but also like full manufacturing lines, and making sure we're teaching all of those competencies along the way. And then Industry 4.0, smart manufacturing. I mean, it's here. It was the big companies, the Toyotas and the GMs who were leading the way. And for a long time, people were like, the small and mid-sized businesses were thinking, well, this doesn't affect me, whatever, I'll let them do it. I'm going to do my own thing. But now it's like, no, you have to do this. This is where manufacturing is going. And so again, the question is, if industry is doing it, education needs to be doing it. We need to be familiarizing students with these technologies. So now we're going to see more of the data science and computer science students who are going to be involved in the technical education programs, artificial intelligence, and all of that stuff being involved in the technical side of things, that whole IT OT convergence that we're seeing in manufacturing. I think we're going to see in education as well. So I'm really excited about that, because you're bringing together students who typically wouldn't have classes together or interact with one another, or, think that they're, working on the same kind of stuff, but they are. So more of those computer science for your university, academic students getting into the tech ed classroom and applying their learning to what's happening in the world of advanced manufacturing.
Good stuff. So before we wrap up, we got to touch on some personal stuff. You mentioned you're a book nerd.
Yeah.
What kind of books do you like to read?
All the kinds of books. Oh my gosh, everything. So I as an English major, I'm like, you have to read all of the classics, and I like American modernist literature. I'm a big Hemingway fan. I was just in Key West, so I had to go and see Ernest Hemingway's home.
Very cool.
Very, very cool. Yeah. But I also like, thrillers and crime, all that stuff. And then I like a lot of nonfiction too. All those business and self-improvement, health books, all that fun stuff. Just anything I can gobble up.
Yeah. Well, so as you see, I'm right there with you. I like to read a bunch of stuff too.
I'll tell you, my husband is reading the Harry Potter series for the first time.
Really?
And he just picked him up. And he was of the Goosebumps generation when he was a kid. So like he missed the Harry Potter thing. And so I think when he pulled out that first book, I just looked at him and I was like, I'm just going to watch you read this, because I'm so excited knowing what you're going to experience.
Very cool. Good. And you mentioned before we started recording that you're into all kinds of athletics. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I think, it's important to be mentally active and physically active. So, I've been doing some. So I was one of those kids that was an athlete, a 3-sport athlete growing up. I was a gymnast. I did cheerleading in college, and then post my school career, it was like, well, what do I do with myself now? So I got into some middle distance running and weightlifting, but now I do some fun stuff. I do the Ninja Warrior stuff, obstacle course, stuff you see on those TV shows, all those obstacles. Yep. I do some kickboxing and been doing that for a few years. So anything that's a little bit crazy, I like to do. But you're a cyclist, right?
I am, yeah, lifelong. So I got into that when I was a teenager, and that was pretty cool, because I played some sports in high school and had this ready-made outlet when I got into college. And
that's perfect.
And after that, raced bicycles for a few years there after college when I had some money to actually buy the equipment.
That's no joke. That is.
Oh my gosh.
That's. I mean, I got on a bike for the first time since I was a kid, like 2 years ago. I was like, oh, it's a whole different kind of physical endeavor.
Yeah, it's amazing stuff, but you know, it's like you find with any of the sports, you can take it as kind of casually or as insanely involved as you want.
Yeah, right. The cool thing with cycling is that you can do that forever.
Yes. Yep. It's very easy on your joints. It was interesting, back like 10, 15 years ago, got reading and noticed at the same time how if you don't have any jarring in your exercise program, that's actually a bad thing. You lose bone density. And I can actually feel that. And so I actually did some running, got into it, and you know, in keeping with the insanity of some of the cycling stuff I did, once I was running, then said, okay, I have to do a marathon. So I did a few of those.
Oh, really? Wow. That's impressive. I don't know if I ever want to do that. I think a half was enough. I'm good.
It's interesting. As you experienced with the half, it seems so daunting when you first go in, and then you go through the training program, and you know, if you stick with it, you're fine. It's still definitely a challenge.
It's a mental challenge to get through those hours of just the same motion over and over. Which
cycling obviously prepared me for.
Sure.
The beating up, it did not prepare me for. So I had to train into that. But yeah, as long as you keep moving, keep doing different stuff. I've gotten into rucking. You know what that is?
It's like backpacking, right?
Yeah, basically throw a bunch of weight in a backpack and walk around wherever you are. And that's been phenomenal.
Wow.
You wouldn't think it'd be such a great workout, but the combination of the weight and you know, having to handle being under a different set of loading and all that.
Right.
It's been a lot of fun. It's been a really, really good way to occupy winters when I'm not on the bike.
Yeah. Do you have a lot of good trails out by you?
For like mountain biking?
For mountain biking, for rucking, for running, anything?
Rucking, I just do around my neighborhood. Mountain biking, we do have in West Michigan a good number of trails. I've actually, in the past 3 years, gotten back into trail riding, which I hadn't done in forever.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So then what's down the road? You're gonna keep up with the running and the insanity on Ninja?
Yeah, you know, I'm a really competitive person. People keep asking me like, "Oh, are you gonna audition to be on that American Ninja Warrior show?" I'm like, "Oh, maybe someday I'll put an audition tape and just see what happens." For now, I enjoy just being able to do it, and the actual practice of it is enough for me.
All right. Well, so I'll keep an eye on your LinkedIn site and put it on there if you're going to be on TV. So I'll make sure to watch it. All right. Well, any thoughts on technical training or any of that before we wrap up?
No, I would just say, hey, if you're an employer and you're not participating in conversations with your educators, make it happen. And same to educators, get your industrial employers involved. They want to help. They want the people. So make those connections. Talk to each other.
Yeah, couldn't agree with you more. And in the meantime, everyone who's watching this, do check out the TechEd podcast. As you could tell from Melissa's discussion here today, she has lots of cool stuff and bringing lots of cool people in to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good deal. Well, thanks so much for joining us. It's great having you on.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I enjoyed it.
And thank you to all of our watchers and listeners. Tune in again for our episodes every first and third Tuesday of every month. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vanoski. Watch for new episodes dropping on the first and third Tuesdays of every month.